Embroidery is the best way to personalize something. You can do something meaningful for your home or for a gift for a friend. And you don't ever have to have picked up a needle and thread to be able to do it. Today, I'm going to give you 5 helpful tips to make it seem like you've mastered embroidery. First up, let's talk about some basics. You don't need very much to embroider. You need a piece of fabric to embroider on, a needle, some thread, and maybe a hoop. But I'm going to give you a little bit more detail. Depending on your fabric, and we'll get to that a little bit later, it's a good idea to use an embroidery hoop like this. It stretches your work out perfectly and makes it a little easier to put your stitches in and out. It doesn't really matter what size you get because you can move this around as you go. So I think it's a little bit easier to start with something small and just move it as you need to and not carry around a big hoop. You also need embroidery thread. Right now in the project I'm working on, I'm using this beautiful yellow thread. I like to work with DMC thread. They have beautiful colors, they're all labeled by number. What I do is unroll it onto a clothespin, write the number right on the clothespin, and that way as I'm using it, if I run out, I know exactly what to get, but it's stored nice and easily and not getting all tangled. You also need a needle. I like to use sharp needles when I embroider. If you go to the craft store, there's a good chance you're going to find dull embroidery needles, and that's not the kind I like to use. You can really just use a regular sewing needle. As long as it is big enough so that the eye of the needle can get all of your thread through, you'll be fine. And with your embroidery floss, something I didn't know before I started to embroider is that you actually don't usually use the whole floss that comes on the roll. That piece of thread is made up of usually 6 threads, and you peel them apart and use them either in 1s, 2s, 3s, or 4s, depending on the thickness of your stitch. Most of my stitches are 2 to 3 pieces of embroidery thread at a time. Hi, Helen came to play. Helen's favorite things are yarn crafts, embroidery, and anything with thread, string, or fabric that she can destroy. The next thing we're going to talk about is what to embroider. I know some beautiful embroidery artists out there that look at a picture and they embroider the most beautiful things, or they come right out of their head. But not everybody's an artist and not everybody's that creative. So there's a really easy hack to that. Print anything you want out on a computer, take a drawing that's already made, a print, a piece of art in your house, anything you want, and you can transfer that to your embroidery. I recently embroidered the numbers on an advent calendar, so I just printed the numbers off on my computer and used those. It was easy. You can look through books for art you want to use. There's a lot of great designs in some of the adult coloring books. I love to make things really personal by using a photo of someone's house or maybe a place that they've been and using that as my inspiration to embroider. You can also embroider something that somebody's handwritten. You could hand embroider a recipe card from your grandmother, for example, and that has a lot of really special meaning. So print something off the computer, find it in a book, find it amongst something you have, and you're good to go. You can take anything and turn it into a work of art through embroidery. So tip number 3 obviously has to be, how do you get these designs onto your fabric so that you know what you're embroidering? In some cases, your fabric is going to be see-through enough for you to see right through to your design and copy it that way. So for example, with this radish that I embroidered, it's on a tea towel that is translucent enough that I could put my towel right over the design and trace it with a pencil before I embroidered it. It was super easy. But not everything you want to embroider is going to be translucent enough to see through. And that's where my very favorite embroidery tip comes in. So one of my favorite things of all time is this self-adhesive, water-dissolvable stabilizer. It makes it so easy to put any image or lettering you want right on your fabric. You can see through this fairly easily, so I just lay it over whatever lettering or image I want, and I trace over that image with a pencil or a Sharpie. And then I just adhere it to my fabric and I embroider right over it. I do all of the main lines of my project with this on my fabric. I get it wet so that the stabilizer dissolves, and then I continue on with my project, filling in any colors or any extra details that I want. You can print directly on this as well, but I'm usually doing something at kind of the last minute and I don't have time to do that, so that's how I did this project that I'm working on right now. So I took that stabilizer and I laid it over a drawing that my husband actually did when he was in architecture school living in Rome. And then I adhered it to this piece of canvas and I went over all of the main lines with a black thread, and now I'm going back in and adding color. There wasn't any color in his drawing, but I'm adding a little extra Ashley flair to it that way. When I'm done, I'm actually going to use this piece of canvas as the front of a throw pillow. So on our couch we'll have a throw pillow that has a design that my husband drew and I embroidered. Isn't that fun? Tip number 4 is really easy. Just know your fabric. It is easiest to embroider on a fabric that doesn't have any stretch. You can embroider on a fabric that's stretchy, but you can't use a hoop with it. If you put stretchy fabric in an embroidery hoop like this and stretch it out, then after you're done embroidering and you take the hoop off and it shrinks back in, you're gonna have a lot of puckering in your thread. So if you have to use a stretchy fabric, don't use a hoop, but you're gonna have a lot better luck, especially if you're a beginner, if you make sure your fabric isn't stretchy at all. Tea towels are really easy, any kind of linen. I've been doing a lot on canvas. It's nice and thick and doesn't have any stretch to it. It's perfect. And my tip number 5, it doesn't have to be perfect. As I am doing my embroidery and I'm stitching along, I make so many mistakes. I'm consistently off a little bit to one side, or one of my stitches comes a little loose, and guess what? In the end, it just doesn't matter. You have so many stitches at the end of it, especially if you're filling anything in, that it's almost impossible to see a mistake. As you're going and you're looking at every little stitch, it's easy to focus on the flaws, but the reality is at the end of the project, you're not going to see them. Don't get caught up in perfection. It's going to look perfect when you're done, even if every single stitch wasn't perfect along the way. I promise. I hope after my 5 tips that you're ready to go out there and try some embroidery. If you have any questions as you get going on your embroidery, drop me a comment below. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel so that you're the first to know about every DIY project. And head over to my website to subscribe to my email list for exclusive tips and free patterns.